Hey everyone, welcome to coveyouth.com to our March 2025 webinar. Today we are talking about outreach and a little bit about evangelism. And we have my good friend, our special guest, Nicole Matley, with us today. So Nicole, thanks for joining us.
Hey, hey.
Yeah, it's snowing here. I hear it's snowing there, or was snowing in Omaha. Yeah, right on.
Still snowing for sure. Yep.
Awesome. Well, maybe in the chat, if you're watching, feel free to jump in, chime in. What's the weather doing in your neck of the woods? As Al Roker would say on the Today Show. Hey, today like I said, we're talking about outreach and evangelism. And so, but we invited Nicole on to the webinar today because Nicole, as a youth worker, has been connected to the Covenant, especially with a couple churches in the Omaha area, and has done a phenomenal job multiple times of growing youth ministries, either from scratch or just from kind of like a little bit, and then kind of being able to do the outreach piece well to grow youth ministries. And so, so I thought, man, she'd be a great person for us to be able to pick her brain and find out a little bit more about what maybe strategies or insights she uses. So today is going to be a conversation. Nicole and I are just going to chat about some things that we both have experienced in our ministry careers as we've done that work of outreach. And so hopefully this is helpful for you and a blessing for you. And feel free, please, if you're watching live, feel free to drop your own ideas in the chat or questions, and we'll do our best to see those as well. But if you're watching this later, in the on coveyouth.com where it'll be posted, feel free to drop in your own ideas in the comments below the video too, so we can collaborate together and learn from each other. So, so with that, Nicole, our first question, I'm curious if you have an outreach fail story that like a time when, like, I don't know, you were doing an event or something like that, and a kid came and or something happened where it was just a complete, like, oh no, kind of facepalm moment. Have you ever experienced anything like that?
Gosh, if you haven't had a fail, are you really doing ministry at this point? Yeah,
Good.
man, I 100%, plenty of them. I think my worst one would be I was young and dumb in ministry. I was brought in as an intern, and I decided that I would do an outreach event of going to a place called Worlds of Fun, which a lot of you are probably familiar with. I had never been there myself, and I barely knew the youth group because I had just came here for the summer, and I made the decision to take a group with their friends to Worlds of Fun. And I chose to not meet every single person that was going. And I said the day of would be a great time to meet these people because it's an outreach. It's going to be great.
Yeah.
Yeah. And no, I mean, it was a great time up until one of my students decided that she was going to leave the park. And no one knew where she was at. And so we had to go find her and chase her down. And she was out looking for a bus in the parking lot of Worlds of Fun. Yeah.
Watch.
Yeah. That was.
Trying to go home or just anywhere else?
She said she just wanted to live in Kansas City. She didn't like Omaha.
Oh my gosh. Wow. That's
so,
crazy. That's
10
pretty
out of
wild.
10, don't recommend not meeting people before you go.
Yes. Wow. That's
Yeah.
hilarious. Yeah. Right on. Well, yeah, I can remember one of the stories that comes to mind for me, actually, it's a different one than I told you about earlier. We actually had a student go on a fall retreat with us, and I had communicated, and this kind of, yours kind of reminds me of this, but I had communicated, like, when, parents need to pick up their students when we get back. And we got back and there was no parent. And turns out the parent had the wrong day. Like, somehow in some communication somewhere, they had picked up, like, it was the next day, which was weird because it was a Monday and there was school. So, like, the fact that they had that on and didn't, like, ask a question.
Oh no.
Yeah. So we were sitting there waiting, and the parents were, like, at the lake. I don't know, like, nowhere around. And so we finally got a hold of them. They gave me permission to take the kid home, but that was and it was a brand new kid that had been invited by a friend and whatever. And so, yeah.
Oh,
like, ouch.
rough. And you want to go home yourself.
Right.
And you're
Yeah.
like, nope,
Exactly.
I got another 2 hours.
Yes. Just like stabbing your eye out. Like, no.
Oh.
So there you go. Yeah.
So
Outreach, good stuff, but it doesn't always work. So, or work the way we intend it to.
nope.
Right on. So as we're talking about outreach, Nicole, we should define it. That might be helpful. At least define how we think about it so that it kind of frames our conversation today. So how do you when you think about outreach, reaching out to kids that don't know Jesus, like what comes to mind, or how do you define it, or what's the framework in which you try to operate in that?
So I'm going to give a short phrase and I'm going to kind of expand on it, I think. So
Okay.
I would say it's being intentional about pursuing those who are far from Jesus by being a safe space.
Mm-hmm.
And if I were to like expand that out a little bit, I would say being intentional about pursuing others who are far from Jesus, whether they have or haven't accepted him, by being a safe space where people can come to know and follow him.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
That's good.
Maybe even bringing new students to your church community, youth group, that kind of thing.
Yeah. When you say being a safe space, like, can you unpack that just a little bit more?
Yeah, being very intentional with your words, with your actions, being a safe space with your culture and everything that you're doing, whether that's in youth group itself or meeting kids out in a different space, letting kids and students know like you're there for them and only for their benefit. It's not for you, it's not for anyone else, but it's because you're trying to let them know the love of Jesus.
That's awesome. And so it's actually like, when you say space, there's actually like multiple ways to think about that, which I think is really, really important because it helps us think outside the walls of the church, right? Like we get so stuck in thinking like it has to happen here in the building. And while our buildings are a great asset for ministry, they're not the only place for ministry. And so, yeah, that's huge. Yeah. When I think about it, I think I have a similar framework, but I also would add that like I want to be a safe place, like you said, whether that's on-site, off-site, whatever, but inviting kids into the community of the youth group, and not for my own benefit though, like not so that I can say, oh, I had this many kids at youth group, but for their benefit, right? Because I want, like, hopefully we've been able to create a culture in our youth ministry, which is probably step one before outreach, but create a culture in our youth ministry that is safe, where any kid would feel welcome. And then when they do come, that culture and context is set up that way for their benefit, like so that they have a space that, like you said, that is safe, where they can ask questions, they can wrestle with things, they can be challenged with new ideas about who Jesus is. And it's not about like, oh, look at how many kids we had a youth group this week, that kind of thing. So
kids will sniff it out 100%.
Absolutely. Yeah. It feels so inauthentic when that is the like primary thing. And sure, numbers have a place, right? But when they're the main thing that's out front, so not okay. Like it just doesn't, in my opinion, doesn't lead to really healthy ministry. So yeah. Yep. Cool. Okay. Well, Nicole, I realized I skipped something, and that is just giving a little bit of our backgrounds in terms of ministry and outreach. And so tell us a little bit about like, how many years have you been doing youth ministry? I know it's kind of off and on for you, and that's great. But then also, what is your current context? Like, because you got some new things going on, and that's really cool.
Yeah. Oh, so youth ministry for me started at age of 19 as a volunteer. So I volunteered 19, I think it was for about 4 years. I'm a 3. But I volunteered in a high school group in a CMA denomination church. That was super fun, set me up for success. And in that time frame, I was a part of a college group that I was also one of the lead leaders. And so I got a lot of good experience and exposure. And then I was sent over to Omaha because I live in California. So I was sent to Omaha to be an intern for a summer, just to see if ministry was like my jam, or, if women can actually do this thing. Because I didn't think so. But God like set a fire in me. And even though I had to go back to California, I came back the year after that. And I became a full-time youth pastor here in Omaha for, I think it was 4 years. And then I had to turn around and go back to California to finish up some teaching stuff. And then I came back after 4 years in California, I came back to here, back to Nebraska to be a youth pastor for another 2 years in one context and another year in another context. And every time I was actually a full-time youth pastor, I was at a Cub church. So that's awesome. And my final current context at this moment is I am working for Youth for Christ, which is, I'm sure most of you would be familiar with it, but it's just an organization that works outside the church, but it gives access to people, for us leaders to be able to go into schools specifically and preach the gospel to those who most of the time have never even heard the word of God. So it is an awesome opportunity to get out there and share the love. Yeah, so that's where I'm at, which is, it's been fun because it's been, I think, a month now that I've been here, and it's good to see what God can do in and out of a church scenario. So I get to see both.
Yeah, that's awesome. Right on. Very cool. Yeah. Just real quick for me, like I grew up called to ministry as a freshman in high school. So my youth pastor invested in me that way. Went to college for ministry. So I had some internships there, and then ended up in Rochester Covenant Church in Rochester, Minnesota. I was there for 5 years. Then moved to Kansas, was in the church for 8.5 years. A little stint in Nebraska at Covenant Cedars for 1.5 years. And then back to Salina, Kansas for 5 years. And now I'm in Colorado at The Well as a co-lead pastor with my wife, Amber. So we love doing that here, and get to still do youth ministry here because we have a really tiny church. So we partner with 4 churches partner together for a youth group here. And it's kind of funny because we have 4 churches. That's like, well, you must have a ton of kids. No, we have like 10 kids. And that's just like basically all high schoolers, maybe like 2 middle schoolers. So it's really funny.
Hey, that ain't the state of the church though. I mean,
yeah, exactly. Yeah. So just creative things, and just trying to do ministry creatively in a unique context that way. So anyway, cool. So I think what's great, Nicole, is that with your current role, there's some really cool insights that you're going to have from the Youth for Christ world, because like you don't have a church, you don't have a youth group that you're doing ministry within the context of. And so it's like 100%, like to me on the outside looking in, I would say like it's 100% outreach. And I know there's lots of other things that you do, but it's probably not 100%, but I'm sure a high percent of what you do is actual outreach work. Yeah. So I'm excited for your perspective today to be able to speak into some of these things. So thank you for being with us.
Yeah. Thanks for having me. I'm glad to be here.
Yeah. Cool. Okay. So in the context that we've operated in, this is the question. Have you operated with intentional strategies, or has it been more fly by the seat of your pants? And Nicole, I'm really excited to hear your journey with this, because you've got experience both in the church and now in parachurch. And so and maybe also how has that changed over the course of your career? Like, what have you, from early on to now?
Yeah. So 90% of the time it's a planned effort.
Okay.
There's a 10% chance where God's calling you to do something super uncomfy in the midst of your day that you're not working. And so it's not a planned thing, but you're doing outreach because God's called you to it.
Yeah.
But most of the time, 9 times out of 10, it is planned, because if it's not intentional, then you're not going to be gaining the interest of the students as well as you could. You're not also doing a disservice to Jesus in that regard too, because you're not allowing him to flow through you before going into those scenarios, if that makes sense. So yeah, it is 9 times out of 10 planned. And a lot of those things need to be thought out months in advance, because you got to think about the seasonal activities that are coming up, whether that's Christmas, doing elf and spaghetti eating contests with all the junk inside of it, or it's summertime and going to the pool or not going to the pool, giving eyes on what the school calendar looks like. Omaha's a little unique because we have so many schools that come around our different churches. And so when I was in a church itself, we sometimes had upwards of 15 different high schools represented. So it's just having eyeballs on all the spring breaks and all the different things that are going on. So it's definitely paying attention to those calendars and seasonal things that are going on and doing it well. So if you only have one high school, jealous. Pretty easy to keep track of.
Yeah, for
Um,
sure.
but
Yeah, and that was
yeah.
my case in Minnesota, or not Minnesota, in Kansas. The first time around, we literally, it was some small communities, but in McPherson, it was like McPherson Middle School, McPherson High School, and that was it.
Yeah.
For the most part, like, yeah. So
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
that was
So for
nice.
sure, those.
Cool.
And I just, you have to also be thinking ahead of, you know, if I'm building a program or if I'm trying to build my youth group strong, it's how am I doing that and honoring God in the same way, because it's not about the numbers. So it's
Yeah.
really learning how to do those outreaches while fostering it around those that are already present and kind of helping God mold that. I don't know if I jumped into the culture a little too soon, but I just feel like it's important to tie that in a little bit, because when we're thinking about being intentional in that 9 out of 10 times, it's how am I building that culture and pursuing the outreach piece. So
for sure.
when you're looking into doing one-on-ones, right? It might not just be a one-on-one. It could totally be a one-on-one, but with a group of friends. It's that one student you have at your church, but saying, hey, bro, like, let's go get ice cream or cookies, or let's go. I like Starbucks, so I'm a Starbucks chick, but let's go get something and bring your friends with you. If there's one, awesome. If there's 10, awesome. And I'll expense that, and that'll set up that way of letting them know, like, hey, I love you. I'm going to pay for this because I want to get to know you better. And I value the fact that you're trusting me to get to know you and your friend group. So
yeah, that's brilliant. Yeah, I love that. So that's awesome that you're like 90% of the time. So when I started in ministry, like, I knew it was a thing I needed to do, but I honestly felt like there was a part of me that was just like, well, they'll just come because my youth group is clearly awesome.
yeah.
And it was crickets. Like, well, like why does nobody come to this cool thing I'm doing? Like, oh, because I didn't actually like communicate it or promote it or do any contact or investment work in like talking to my students about like, hey, maybe you should invite your friends to church because like maybe they need Jesus, you know. I just was like, it's just gonna be awesome. And it wasn't, because nobody came, so I had to shift over time and become the 90-10. Yes, absolutely. Yep. Right on.
I mean, I can't say I did that from the beginning.
yeah right. We grow into it for sure, especially if it's not your natural personality bent, then like it's a muscle, and and I don't, if it's just not like the forefront of your mind or even your gifting or your passion. Like, you know, there's some of us that are super excited and passionate about teaching or preaching. And so like our natural bent is to put hours and hours and hours into crafting the most perfect message. But then if we don't do any outreach, nobody's there to hear it. So it's like, you know, gotta, you know, or whatever your gifting may be, in that way. So Nicole, let's do a little deeper dive into your role, especially with YFC now, but knowing that your time in youth ministry informs that. But what are some of the ways as a youth pastor and as YFC that you have been able to like do the contact work? Like, how do you get to know kids that don't know Jesus, or, you know, maybe were saved but haven't been part of the church more specifically? You mentioned like one-on-ones, like taking a student out and maybe getting ice cream and then having them invite 10 friends or whatever, which is awesome. That's brilliant. What are some other ways, like, are there other clubs you've been connected to, or just other things that you've been able to really identify as kind of like some key things that have worked in your context?
Totally. So one of the reasons I became pretty strong with being evangelistic in my context was because I got involved with Youth for Christ. So obviously I'm working with them now, 10 years later, but finding a local club that their focus and their aim is the gospel and is going in and finding those spaces where kids are at and partnering with them, whether that's volunteering or whatever context it would be. That was one of the biggest ways that I had most success early on in my in my ministry, because I joined our middle school and high school club that was pretty close to where our church was, even though we serve over 14 high schools. I was able to plug into one high school and plug into one middle school, and I was able to meet with those students outside a club and then eventually invite them into youth group itself. And that, I can't speak for FCA or Young Life because I've never been a part of those organizations, but YFC's main goal obviously is for kids to come to know and love Jesus, but second fold is to get them plugged into a local church. And so what I've loved about YFC in particular is that they have the heart for both, because I think there's going to be a big miss that the churches have just because the name church. It scares kids, it scares their parents, there's hurts there. And so if we could bring Jesus without all of those hurts to students, I think you service them better. So I would say 100%, like going onto the kids' turf, the more that you go on their turf, the better off you are. So like FCA is one of those, Fellowship of Christian Athletes, YFC again, Young Life. Those are just great additions to your outreach, because a lot of the people in those organizations are already putting in the work. You just get to come beside them and support them, and then really just see the kids through. So I would say that's one of those ways. The other one is going to, if you can, especially because McPherson, right? Going to the football games, going to the volleyball games, whatever your students are doing, invite yourself to it. Over here, oh my gosh, it drives me nuts. Show choir is the biggest thing since sliced bread. Like I don't get it personally as a volleyball player. I don't get it. But my girls, mostly girls, love show choir. And I have had a lot of access into show choir groups just because I've gone to their show choir shows. And they're don't get me wrong, they're mind blowing and they're a ton of work. But like it's the afterwards where I was able to meet 4 different friends, and then now my student who introduced me to them can say, hey, you remember you met her after the show choir competition? You want to come to my youth group? It's just an easier pinpoint to be like, oh yeah, she seemed nice, she smiled at me, she came to our thing, like cool.
Totally.
Yeah,
just showing up and being on campus, even if you can't like during the school day, but like anything after school or whatever, and you're seeing kids and like, oh, that's my youth pastor, that's my youth leader or whatever for volunteers, like it just communicates something that's like, oh, that's a cool person, they showed up to our stuff. So that's awesome.
I know one of the other things, sorry to cut you off, one of the other things, because I forgot about it, is helping with senior night, or helping with post-prom
dances,
all of those things. Usually because you're not the parent, you're kind of the cool person to be there.
Right.
I'm nervous for when my 3 little ones are in high school because I don't think that's going to be the case, but we'll see. Maybe they'll love me like Pads and Ella love you guys, but we'll see what happens.
There you go. Amber and I have some stories of chaperoning prom. But you're right, and that's actually a really great way to build credibility with like principals and vice principals and school activity people, because especially if they're closed off for you going to lunches or whatever, you can at least build some credibility in the school community with them, and those are the key stakeholders. They're like, you want to come help with our dance, like really? You're like, yeah, it'd be awesome.
Stay up till 2, are you sure?
I'm gonna bring 3 adult volunteers with me. What? It just shocks them. It's a great way to bless the community. So in a way that it's like, okay, we'll take your help, no problem. So
which that credibility piece, I forgot to mention the new like YFC piece with that. We're all about relationships. I mean, churches should be anyways, but YFC's whole thing, because we do have to work as missionaries, but our whole goal is relationship. And so no matter what we're doing, whether it's relationship with the parent, relationship with the student, relationship with the churches around us, like everything that we're doing is built around trust and relationships. And if we're not doing either of those things, we're not going to be successful, which totally can tie back into youth ministry. I mean, I already learned so much. One of the things I learned just last weekend was my supervisor did a bunco night for some of his sponsors who are like millionaires who like literally run own the fireworks around us. It's just mind blowing. And I didn't know I was rubbing shoulders with millionaires until afterwards. So thanks him for that.
Yeah.
But he goes, you have to be intentional with these people because people come and ask them for money all the time. He goes, I didn't ask them for their money. He goes, all I did was ask for them to come see what we're doing with middle schoolers and high schoolers and to come along and join the party. And these people just want a space where they can come and have fun and enjoy themselves. So have a good relationship with them and going forward. And so I think that's the same thing with parents. When you're looking at youth ministry, your parents are going to be your safeguards. And so they're not going to let you have access to their kid if you're not being intentional with having a good relationship with them.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah. One summer I did, when we were in Kansas, I did maybe I did this 2 summers, but I did by grade, I did a barbecue for the parents. So I did like a 7th grade parents barbecue, an 8th grade parents barbecue, 9th grade, all like 6th through 12th. And I think there was a couple classes I paired together just because it was going to be, a lot. And it was so cool because then it was inviting the parents into relationship, not only with me and my family, but with each other. And because obviously their kids are hanging out at youth group together or at school together, and it gave them a chance to get to know each other and just
100%.
really good like credibility and trust.
That's brilliant. Why didn't I think of that?
I don't know.
I like it.
Yeah, it's good. So now it's out there for everybody to steal. So everybody can go do it. Okay. I wanted to circle back. Well, actually, one of my key ways of getting into the lives of kids and getting on campuses was when we were in McPherson, Kansas. I signed up to be a bus driver, and school districts across the U.S. need bus drivers. And so if you like, number one, you have to like to drive, right? But if you like kids, and that if you're in youth ministry, you probably do, you are like a great potential bus driver. But what it gave me in that context, it gave me an activity or my ID badge was for the school district. And so it gave me access to the schools and to all of the games for free. Ooh. So I didn't have to pay anything. And when I signed up to take an activity trip, like I would figure out what are in my youth group, what sports do my kids play, or what activities are they involved in, or if it's band or choir or whatever. And then when I would, at the bus barn, they would give us the sheet of activity trips. I would know, like, oh, wrestling, I know I need to take that one. I need to take this choir trip. I need to take this because that's where my kids are. And so I would sign up for those as best as I could. And then when the kids are getting on the bus, it's like the kid that I know is like, hey, Jim, you're a bus driver. No way, that's awesome. 5, welcome aboard. And then they turn around to the kid behind him and they're like, that's my youth pastor. And like, you should come to youth group with us, So like that created just super cool opportunity just on the bus. But then getting to the event, especially if it was obviously it's an away event, the fact that I drove 3.5 or 4 hours to go to a wrestling meet to watch our kids wrestle, like I would show up, I would sit next to the parents and they're like, you're out here, we're in the middle of nowhere, Kansas. And I'm like, oh yeah, like I wanted to come see the kids, and yes, I drove the bus, they're like, you took your time to do that? Like, holy cow, like we would expect you to be at the one in town, but the fact that you did it out here. And honestly, like in youth ministry, guys, we don't always get paid a whole lot. So being a bus driver is a nice way to make a little extra cash to get double dip because you're doing youth ministry at the same time you're getting paid to be a bus driver.
And I'm glad you said that because substitute teaching is another phenomenal way to do it. And that's one of the ways I did a long time ago. And in YFC, they allow us to go and sub, which is perfect. I get to be rubbing shoulders with middle schoolers or high schoolers all day.
Yeah.
And sometimes
brilliant.
I have to crack down on cell phones, which totally sucks. Yeah. But it is a good way of getting to know the kids. And especially when you can like sub PE and throw some fun games in there.
Super easy. Yeah. Pull out your youth ministry bag of tricks and be like, I bet you guys have never played this game.
I got some pool noodles and some crowns. Watch what we do with this.
Let's go. Then the principal walks in and is like, you can't hit each other with pool. Oh, sorry. Yeah. That's good.
Actually, this is a total tangent, but I'm going to go there. I just subbed on Monday in a 6th grade classroom, and my bad. This is totally my bad. We had 5 minutes left of school, but my kids were silent all day. Like, they did so well. At the end, I rewarded them with rock, paper, scissors. I call it support train, where they hype each other up when they win.
Yeah.
They got so loud that like 2 teachers had popped into my classroom and told me, "Excuse me, we're still learning." And I got in total big trouble for it. But my kids were having the time of their life. Like, "Can you be our teacher?" But I was able to say, "Next year when you go to middle school, come to Campus Life, because I'll be on your campus every morning at 6:45."
There you go. Yes, exactly. Boom. Let's go. Yes. See, right there. That's awesome. I love it. Yeah.
Oh, I had to go apologize to those teachers, and I'm hoping to do that. But
That was wise. That was good follow up. Yes. Yes. Hey, real quick before we move on, I wanted to circle back to the clubs. I had a conversation. This was an interesting. You made the comment that Youth for Christ really likes to try to get kids into the church.
Yeah.
And that is awesome. And I think that's very true of FCA, Fellowship of Christian Athletes, and Young Life. But it's a challenge because I met with an area director for Young Life in Kansas at one point, and I asked the question. I was like, how do you like, you've got this club, that's great, but then how do you transition kids into the church? I said, have you seen it work? And he said the only time I've ever seen it work successfully is there was a youth pastor that would go to one of the clubs that was in his area, and that youth pastor was able to invite kids to their church. He said that's the only time. Otherwise, it was like the club leader like would go to church and invite kids to go with them, which is great. That's awesome. But other than that, like, so there was no other pathway. And so as a youth leader, the hard thing is, like, it's another night of the week, because club, it might, like Young Life Club might meet on Wednesday night or whatever night. But so then it's like, man, I have youth group and now you want me to go to club. It's like, well, maybe you don't go every week. Maybe you go once a month or whatever you can work out with. But even if you can just figure out a way to be even a light presence in those spaces, I think Rob probably would return huge dividends in terms of getting to know kids. So anyway, that's just a thought, is like, if you have the opportunity and the capacity to step into those areas, I think, like, you'll be welcomed with open arms, is what my thought is. Would you agree with that, or would you affirm that?
Yeah, I think you need to prioritize when you look at that 9 out of 10 times, prioritize what you're doing with your outreach and make sure that what you're doing is truly impactful. Because it is scary to think about adding on just an extra hour. But I agree that it's going to return the favor, or whatever, dividends in the end. Like, you're going to get students to come to group. And I have experienced that. I have seen the fruit of that. Even 10 years later, I've had students come back that I met in Campus Life. I was able to pull into my own youth group. I actually just had a conversation with a girl last week who wants to come back to church. But it was because of my original relationship with Youth for Christ. And then she joined my youth group. And now I have a few of those in my circle. But that's awesome. Will always return. And the goal will always be Jesus in the end. And so even if you don't see it right away, it might take a little bit. But I will say one of the biggest pathways for kids from these different organizations to come in is if you are present. I think I'm going to be unique with YFC a little bit, because now I've traveled to 10 different churches and I have the eyes of a youth pastor, and I can see, like, oh, this student's going to plug in here pretty well. This student will plug here pretty well. I was able to even do that because we went on a snow trip and I got to know a couple of different girls, and I was like, you would not be successful at the youth group that I'm going to be helping, but I know Celebration Covenant Church's youth group would be perfect for you. Or you live in this part of Omaha, so, like, you can totally fit in with this church. So I know I'm going to have some unique ways. And I think YFC does try to encourage their people to get out there and partner with different churches, so that they have confidence that they're sending their students from IFC to a good, safe space. So there are other pathways, but I would say it's a 70-30, about a 70-30 about for the success rate. But if you're intentional, you will get students to come back. I mean, unless you're a creep, but that's not
That's funny. Yeah. Right on. Okay, good. That sounds good. So one of the things that is really, we touched on this earlier, and I want to do a deeper dive into it, and that is creating a culture that is that breeds growth. And so when we think about outreach, and when we talk about culture, we're creating a culture within our youth ministry, within our church context, right? Or in your context, it would be like Campus Life Club has to have a culture that's safe, right? And that breeds growth. So that elements of that would be like creating a culture where kids feel safe, where they feel welcome. And so, like, how have you navigated that? And if that question isn't quite relevant, like if you're sitting across the table from someone having coffee and they want to create that, what would be the place to start?
Oh gosh, there's a lot. I would say probably the biggest part is starting with communication. Because everything that you communicate, from body language all the way out through your mouth, is going to communicate something to everyone. So whether that's the way your tone of voice sounds when a kid walks into your building for the first time, or the way you're interacting with parents at a basketball game, the way you're crossing your arms, I mean, all of it's going to communicate something. And so it's being very intentional with all of that, because that's going to show how much you are interested in that person. If you are open and you're like using opening language, open whatever, like that person's going to feel more accepted, like they want to come join what you're doing. But if you're kind of closed off in any way, or you start talking negatively, or you have a bad attitude, people aren't going to want to be around you. So I would say the way you communicate in different body language and outwardly is probably where you start, and make sure you're right with the Lord in that. And then secondly, with communication would come a big part of any program is what you're speaking, like what you're speaking about. And it's making sure that your words aren't too eloquent. They're not so out there that kids aren't going to like pick up on it. Now, granted, you probably shouldn't be dropping words like I try to be cool with drip and, or, toasty, whatever all those crazy things are. Trying to be relevant in an appropriate way. So I would say a lot of that is a big part of how to have solid outreach from the beginning, is how you're going to speak things and do things with your body to let people know that they're welcome there, and they're not dumb, but they're actually welcomed into whatever you're speaking about. So I would say start there.
That's great. Yeah, that's good. Yeah, I think on that, like, I love the balance that you suggested there between, you don't want to use churchy language and big words that kids who have never been to church don't know, or what a clue what you're talking about. But you also don't want to use language or try to be
something you're not.
Yeah, like don't be someone you're not, right? Like, because kids, like you said earlier, kids see right through that instantly. And so, like, if kids walk into youth group and I'm wearing Jordans, like, something's wrong. Like, because I never in my life, not that I hate them, I just never have been interested in them. And like, so like I would be trying to do something that is just inauthentic to who I am. And the kids will see through that right away. And the same thing with slang. Like, so you're what you wear, what you say, like, just be you. Like, and if Jordans are you, then wear Jordans. Like, kids will know that that's you. Otherwise they just know you're trying to like wear someone else's skin, so to speak. And it's just, doesn't communicate anything good.
No.
I would add to that. I think that's awesome. And I would add, sometimes not always, this is not like a you should go out and do this right now kind of thing, but if necessary, when I've run into roadblocks in creating a safe culture, I've taken some time to think about, is there a student or a student maybe, or a behavior that is acceptable culturally in my youth group that shouldn't be. So for example, there's always been an issue of like kids talking during the message, or kids talking during worship. And so there have been times where I have like just paused my message and been like, okay, you, like, if it's, because sometimes it's a kid, right? And it's just that kid, and you're like, every week. And I'm like, Billy, like, I really need you to be quiet while I'm talking. Like, if you don't want to listen, that's totally fine, but you're disrupting everyone else around you. And I wouldn't do that to a kid who's like, it's their first night there, right?
Correct. Yeah.
Not even close. Like I would just let the kid get away with it and address it later somehow. But if it's a kid that, consistently has had that behavior, part of the youth group, part of the church, like, I'm going to call it out. And it's probably not just them, right? It's probably the friend or two or three next to them or around them. But then instead of just being like, hey, I need you to stop, I explain the why. And I get with it so that they hear it, but everyone else hears me advocate for them. So I'm like, guys, I need you to be quiet, because what we're presenting tonight is about this. And it's really important. And there are people here that need to hear this message. In fact, you might need to hear it, and then we move back into it.
Yep.
But what it does is it communicates something to the audience, the rest of the audience, that they're important enough and I value their presence enough that they can get something out of the experience by protecting it. In a sense, I'm creating the culture of we're going to respect each other by doing that. So anyway, so like,
that's good.
Don't be afraid, you know what I mean, to say those things. Do it in love, do it with kindness and care, and do it as a discipleship moment, not as a discipline moment, even though it might be discipline, right? But let's think discipleship. So how can I help these kids love the rest of the youth group, and in the same time know those other kids are loved by me as well? Like, I care about you, I care that you're here. So,
and you're going to have a much better conversation, not to cut you off, but you're going to have much better conversation if you've had one-on-ones with that student, at least one or two, because then you have that relationship for them to trust you enough to call them out.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, there's got to be some foundation there. Yep. So anyway, so doing things like that, maybe it's not during the message and it's kids talking all the time. Maybe it's you're on a trip somewhere and some bullying is happening or something like that. Like whatever you're doing, like addressing the whole group, calling out the behavior again appropriately, but it communicates to the whole group that you care. And that lets them know it's a safe place and that their friends are welcome and their friends are going to be cared for too. And so like, that was something that I had to learn the hard way, because like my personality is to run from conflict. And so my tendency was to let those things go. Right. But then I was like, no, I have to stand up for this. So.
And I would say even with that too, if you can have a good relationship with your lead pastor, it would be really helpful, so that when you do have conflict or things, you have the trust of your seniors to handle your business the way you need to handle it. So maybe as you're growing your youth group, you're having those conversations with your lead pastors just to make sure you're on the same page. I had a scenario where there was a kiddo who had 3 strikes for being violent. And in my head, 3 strikes is you're out. Doesn't mean you have to leave the church, but you're going to do something different, like have one-on-ones with me or with another male pastor, because he was a male. So we're going to do something different, but it's not a safe space for these students, because we developed a safe culture, or we were trying to. But then in my context, the lead pastors told me I'm not allowed to do that. And that student had to stay, which killed my youth group. I had most of my kids walk out because they didn't want to be around that. So I would say, as much as possible, be upfront with I'm sure mine was a unique experience, but as much as possible, be protective of your culture and make sure that your leads are on the same page with you in that.
Yeah. That's good. And I don't know, not speaking to your specific situation, because I don't know that, but sometimes like if the lead doesn't know the situation, they're like, well, no, we just want every kid to be here. So I want you to keep that kid here, not fully understanding the whole situation. So if you're able to bring that person into the know, and I've had those conversations with leads before too, like, hey, just FYI, this came up with this student, and I may need to have some sort of deeper interaction around this. Either that's, with them in the moment, or bringing their parents into the office and we have a conversation, or whatever that is. But I just need you to know that. And that's great advice. Yeah, for sure. Yeah.
You just don't want to set yourself up for failure in a lot of ways, for having a really great culture that, you can do all the things, and then for it just to be sort of blown up in the end would stink. So yeah.
Okay, let's talk about pick an outreach event.
Okay.
So what is something that you've done as an outreach event? How and that's worked well? And we'll just kind of drop some ideas here. That's all this is. Maybe they can inspire some others. I can start unless you have something.
You go. I have one, but you go.
Okay, so one of the best season, I would say the best season, most fruitful season of outreach that I had in middle school ministry was in Kansas. But what I would do is the first Wednesday of the month, I would start with an outreach event. So youth group was crafted as a themed game night or a theme night of some sort. And so I would promote leading up to it. And then we would have the theme night, bring your friends, there'll be prizes or whatever you want to do to give away. And then we would go through the game night and then have at the very end was like a little like blurb about Jesus and then an invitation to attend the next 3 or 4 weeks, depending on how many Wednesdays were in the month. And it would introduce the series, the teaching series. And so then kids knew what we were going to dive into. And it was that season was super topical. So it was like, hey, we're going to talk about relationships, or we're going to talk about, fill in the blank, right? How to succeed in middle school or whatever. But then also I would also invite them a month to the next outreach night a month later. So I already had them planned out for the year and already had them themed out. So, so that way I always was able to be promoting the next thing. And that was super helpful. And we were consistent with it. So then like our youth group got used to it, but also the kids that were being invited kind of got used to it throughout the school year, where they began to kind of anticipate and expect the next one. And that we just saw like just exponential growth in our middle school ministry by doing things like that. And so anyway, so that would be, so the communication piece is a part of that, but having a really intentional plan talked about earlier and having a super fun night, just doing that. So that's something that I was able to lean into. What's something that for you?
Well, what I think is brilliant about that strategy is hopefully everyone is given a chance to take a day or two to go on a retreat or do something as a youth pastor to just get away and to plan out the year, or at least 6 months, whatever you can get away with. But then you can start getting those onboarding events. I call them onboarding events. That was something I was taught at one of my churches, and I love that language. So they have an onboarding event, and you can just plan those out according to, like we said at the beginning, according to school schedules and all that stuff. So it's brilliant. It makes it easy as a youth pastor to just be like, oh, this is what we're doing, instead of struggling to figure out in the moment, like, what am I teaching on? So I think that's brilliant. And I can see why you totally had growth in that. My biggest growth moment, I think, was when I was running Youth Alpha, because the whole thing was intentional about inviting your friends, your and one, like, who is the person that you think doesn't know Jesus, and or they are from a background that is very distant. And so we had kids just doubling and doubling and doubling. And the amazing thing was I was offering, I think it was a $5 gift card. I think it was to Sonic. And it was, you got your name in a hat and you got your friend's name in a hat, and they loved it. But they kept bringing them. And I don't really think in the end it was about Sonic anymore. I mean, it could have been, but I think at first that was like an initial like getter, but it was super fruitful. And then after the series ended, we were able to, because that was in the fall time, we were able to start suggesting other things, like come to summer camp with Cedars, come to our spring retreat, come to these different events, which one of my favorite ones is something that DYM created, which is, I think it's Fiesta Night is what they call it. Fiesta Night. Yeah. Anyways, it's all about eating a ton of Taco Bell. Like, it is drinking slushies. It's a burrito eating contest. It's a burrito throwing contest. Like, it's all this stuff, but it's all packaged by DYM. Not that I'm, advertising for them, but it is an amazing thing that's already packaged for you. I had so many kids that came, and they had a blast. And that was one of our end of the year events, because we did it on Cinco de Mayo. It pushed us into, okay, all these friends came, and now let's invite them to all of our summer stuff. So it was all, anyways. So that's, I would say my most fruitful was with Alpha, because it was intentional, but then we also had fun activities and onboarding stuff that meet with it that came afterwards.
That's brilliant. Yeah.
Yeah.
And just so FYI, I just dropped in the chat. It's alphausa.org if you want to check it out. And I
Look
Googled
at
it.
you. You're so
I-
fast.
I Googled it and I found Fiesta Olympics on DOIM, and I dropped that in the chat too. And if you're watching this later, I'll put both those links in the comments or in the description of the video on cubyouth.com. So yeah, actually, and the great thing about Youth Alpha is they just redid the whole thing recently. So I would say it's the highest quality, like it's and most engaging it's ever been. Even Gen Z, they added in some pieces where they're doing some more like interviews with students and things, and so I was pretty impressed with it. So definitely would recommend that. So yeah, so I'm gonna let people know that at the end we're gonna drop Nicole's email if you want more info on the Alpha Nights, like or the Fiesta Night, but especially the Alpha Nights, like check. Feel free to reach out to her because that sounds amazing, especially how you. I feel like we could do a whole webinar just on that, like how you wove together the curriculum along with the fun stuff. But that's beyond our scope and our time today. But that could be like a whole nother thing, I think. So anyway, so maybe we can write that up and you can buy it for free 99. Get it free 99. That's awesome. Okay, Nicole, we've got about 10-ish minutes left. Let's turn the corner or talk about turning the corner. Maybe that's a better way to say it, from outreach to actual evangelism. So bringing these kids in, we're having a good time, right? And that's great. But how do we actually turn the corner and introduce them to Jesus? And so what does that look like? Yeah. So you have any thoughts on that, especially like maybe in your YFC context, what that looks like, but even just in general?
Yeah, well, it'll go back to that communication piece. I think everything you say should point back to Jesus, and it should point people to Jesus. It shouldn't point to yourself. It shouldn't point to your church. It should be pointing people to Jesus himself. We have to handle the gospel with such care. If we go into it flippantly, just thinking we've got this, we're forgetting how the Holy Spirit can work, because it's not about us. So yeah, it has to be handled with care. And the way we speak it, again, we have to avoid Christianese. We have to avoid things that are going to have people stumbling in their brains. I'm so sorry. One of my children is yelling. One moment.
Oh, you're good.
1 second.
Yes, absolutely. That's okay. And while you're doing that, yeah, I would say that another key piece to that is just with the outreach events themselves, you're being the hands and feet of Jesus. And so you're helping them have an amazing experience and loving them towards Jesus. So even in the nonverbal, right? Even when you're not saying anything, how you, like you said earlier, how you treat them, how you welcome them, all of that is foundational to, as Young Life says, to earn the right to share the gospel. So you're building that credibility, and then you have the opportunity in your message series, like I talked about, like, the next 3 weeks or the message series or whatever, there, but also small groups or those one-on-one conversations with kids. All of the outreach work cultivates their heart and their soil to be able to share the gospel. So anyway, back to what you were saying, if you remember where you were at.
Nope, sure don't.
Okay,
but
cool.
I'll bounce on to what you were saying, because I think also important. So YFC, one of the biggest thing is yes, up front, we try to stick, especially with middle schoolers, somewhere between 4 minutes and 7 minutes of talking at all, period, because we lose their attention. Granted, we're not, our focus isn't discipleship in that moment. Our focus is the gospel. So it's pretty easy. I mean, for me, easy to like chunk it down. But our whole goal is getting to small groups, which that's usually where the heart work is done. Usually I can't say we yet. I, especially in my context, have found that kids give their lives to Jesus more frequently in a one-on-one conversation than they do hearing a message up front. And typically the students that have just done I'm feeling it in the moment, raising my hand moment, they don't actually know what they're doing is kind of an emotional reaction versus a head and heart decision and like a true like complete life give to Jesus. If that, and I know that could also be a little bit theological. People can have differences in that, but
Sure.
I have just found that kids that truly have that one-on-one relationship with you and you're actively engaging in the gospel with them that way, they're more likely to give their lives to Jesus versus the upfront, because they hear their teachers all dang day. They hear their parents after that too. And so you're just another adult speaking to them, and you can be so captivating, and yet you're spending 30 minutes chatting at them and they've learned maybe a minute's worth of stuff. So yeah, I would say when you're trying to turn the corner and have evangelism, yes, like up front when you're having your messages, like your language has to be so concise and so well done.
Yeah.
But you also have to be intentional with the difference of evangelism versus discipleship, because they're different. If kids don't know Jesus, they're not going to care about the 10 commandments. they're not going to care about the Sermon on the Mount yet. Like they're not there. They just need to know that they're loved and cared for first before they will even allow the Bible to change them. So yeah.
Yep. That's absolutely true. Yep. I love that. Cool. Okay. All right. Final word. Any last thoughts on outreach? Maybe we covered it all, and that's totally fine.
I feel like we covered a lot, but love Jesus, follow the Spirit's guiding, but be intentional about doing both of those things. Don't just be flying by the seat of your pants.
Yeah. Yep.
Yeah.
I agree.
And I want to tap back into Amber's thing about being a super sponsor. What is
that? Yeah. Okay. So yeah, Amber in the chat mentioned that. So before we do that, I'm going to drop Nicole's email into the chat here. So if you're chatting online and you want to catch up with Nicole and dive a little deeper, maybe into the alpha stuff or different things, her email's there. Also, if you're watching the live stream, that just popped up on the screen. So you can see that there, and feel free to get a hold of her that way. Yeah.
Can I just pause you for a second? Just know I have 3 children under the age of 5. So if I take a second to respond back to you, just know that.
Fair enough.
Yeah.
Fair enough. Yep. Absolutely. And Nicole's here on coveyouth.com too, so you can message her there, and we're happy to share her cell phone with you, not live here, but yes, separately, right? Yeah. All right. Stop for yourself. Okay. So back to our very first question, which was an outreach fail story. Amber dropped it. My wife dropped this in a reminder in that I have a story with a super sponsor, and this is like,
I'm excited.
Like we're done talking about outreach at this point. So if you want to tune out and leave, that's fine. But this would be like bonus content. We're like in bonus content area here.
Love it.
So we did a ski trip, and we're in central Kansas, and we do a ski trip to Kansas City. There's a place north of Kansas City. And so I'm like doing this with middle school kids. And there's a kid in our youth group that has just had rough life. Like, just you know who that kid is in your youth group, right? Like parents relationship stuff not good, and like their own personality things, just struggling to have friends. This student, special needs, on the autism spectrum a little bit, and so he had an IEP, and he had at school a para, and the like we were okay with taking this student, but we needed him to have a buddy, you know what I mean? Like, and so in the context of the school system, he really, really, really liked this leader, this adult. And so his mom suggested, maybe this person could come along. And so, of course, we did our own, our background checks and all of this kind of stuff. And this young man was a college student. And so, but he was working in the school district as a para for our student. And so we go on the trip, and we've got multiple youth groups together for this from McPherson, McPherson, Kansas. And so we're going through the ski trip. We're having a good time. The sponsor brings the student in the kid is, no, I'm sorry, he didn't bring him in. The kid comes in completely soaking wet, which makes sense because it was a warm Kansas day and we're skiing, so it's slushy. But the kid had been wet for so long that he's like shivering. And so he's like pre-hypothermic. And I'm like, where's, I forget the guy's name, right? But where's your buddy? And he's like, oh, he wanted to go off and ski on his own because I was holding him back. What?
Oh no.
So the sponsor dude is off skiing by himself, ditched the kid he's there to serve, and so the kid so we get him like, you know, changed and warmed up, get him hot cocoa and whatever. So anyway, so it's getting close to time to go. This is a little bit later now, and so everybody's gathering in. All the students are coming in and, you know, changing and getting ready to go, and all of a sudden, this, how much we're calling super sponsor, is gone. We're like, where's this dude? What the heck? All of a sudden, this person comes down the stairs from the bar upstairs. He's carrying a beer and drinking it.
Oh
no. Like 4 of us youth pastors and all these other sponsors and leaders that are like, what are you doing right now? And he's like, I'm just having a beer, man. Like, you're on a youth event. You can't do that.
No.
Not only that, with minors, it's a church thing. Like, what are you doing? So yeah, we had to tell him to promptly go throw out his beer, and because it was time to leave anyway, you can't take it in the car. Like, and so yeah, yeah. And since my group and my kid, everybody else nicknamed him Super Sponsor. So then, yeah. So here I am trying to make a safe, welcoming environment for this kid to have an amazing time who has these needs, and here comes the sponsor totally ruining it. It's so, yeah. Anyway,
that's the worst.
Needless to say, I've never had a super sponsor since then. Everyone has been very well vetted.
Rough.
So anyway,
I can see why Amber wanted you to say that one. That's so rough for you though. Like, how are you gonna know that he was gonna just peace out?
Exactly.
Good grief.
When he's, you know, working in the school district and things like that, it's like, okay, all right.
Can't trust every para.
Yeah, exactly. We're like, this is not spring break with your college buddies, bro.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
I love that you trust him enough for you just to go get a beer, but no.
Right. My gosh, yeah. So anyway, there you go. There's some bonus content for you.
Here's a little bit of more bonus content. I had an outreach game night where one of my games was building statues with bubble gum.
Ooh.
Don't do that. I won't say what was made, but things were made that shouldn't have been.
My gosh.
And I didn't notice until I just recently reviewed my footage from 10 years ago, and I'm like, oh, that's what they were building.
Oh my gosh. Oh wow. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
So don't do bubblegum statues.
Yep.
Yeah.
There you go. That's so good. Oh my gosh. Yes. Also, I'll have to say this, but don't use Crisco for a game night. Like I did that, and Crisco got everywhere, all over the church, and it was not good. I almost ruined a family's washing machine because they washed it on cold instead of hot, and so then it caked up. I had to buy so many new washing machine. Thankfully, some hot water cleaning cycle cleaned it up. But yeah,
I feel like what you're saying is we need a youth ministry fail. Time to talk.
Not a bad idea. Yes, absolutely. Right on. Cool.
Don't do these. We've already gone before you to tell you they don't work.
Exactly.
Don't.
We do an outreach part 2, what not to do. Right on. Awesome. Well, that is kind of the end of our content for you guys. And so I hope this has been helpful for you. Thank you for jumping in and hanging out with us today. And if you're watching this later, I hope this, hope this has been helpful. Feel free to reach out to either Nicole or myself if you want to talk more. We also have, if you don't know, we have conference coaches in each region. So you're welcome to chat with them as well. And so you can check that out at covyouth.com and find out who your conference coach is. So thanks for jumping in. Nicole, thank you so much for your time.
Absolutely.
thank you to your family as well for giving you up for this a little bit of time, and this has been awesome. So I just say blessings on you as you continue to venture through the Youth for Christ journey, and super excited for how God's going to use you in that world and to grow the kingdom. So yeah,
Thanks.
So awesome. Well, have a great day, everybody. We'll see you in the next one.
All right. Bye, guys.
Bye-bye.